Hey, welcome to School Night TV, and it's a 93-degree day out, so we're sitting here in the dark ages. And the topic here today is going to be the two standards that I use to determine intelligence in other people. And the first one is the way that somebody detects a resemblance between two people. It's something you see a lot. It's something we humans do all the time is we're constantly looking for resemblance between two people. And I'm not talking about people that are related because that's different. I mean, I'm not talking about you look just like your brother. Oh my God, you look just like your father. Because that's interesting. I'm always kind of interested in that when you see two people who look just like each other. I mean, two relatives who actually closely resemble each other and they're not twins. Because that's just one of those weird biological phenomenon where sometimes you look like a family member, sometimes you don't. And here I am revealing my intelligence. But what I'm actually talking about is when people are comparing two unrelated people, or especially a regular person to a celebrity, and he looks just like so and so. And they don't. They'll be talking about someone who has brown hair, they're white, maybe average build, not me, but and then they'll be comparing them to a celebrity who has those same features, but their actual facial features aren't similar at all. And you see that, and it's like they look exactly alike. You hear it in person, of course, a lot. But then you'll even see it online where I've seen things on just internet sites. I've seen things on internet sites where they'll show someone will be like, my friend looks just like Matt Damon. And it'll be like, it'll show a picture of the friend and it'll show a picture of Matt Damon or another celebrity. And there's no resemblance. And then what makes that even more insane is then there'll be like tons of comments and things like that where they're like, oh my God, your friend is Matt Damon, as a joke and things like that. And, I'm probably revealing something about like my own inner mean spirit this bothers me so much, but it really does. And when I see people do that, I'm like, they're missing something. Either that or I have some other low form of intelligence where I can't pick up on these resemblances. And there are some times where I'll see somebody comparing two faces and I can see where they picked up on some weird subtle feature that is really unique and similar, even if the two people don't look alike. And that's actually impressive to me. That's almost a form of higher intelligence if you're picking up on like some weird shape that you don't typically see in people and you're using that as the comparison, or if there's this weird general like you like glance at someone and there is a weird resemblance for a minute. That's interesting to me. But too often I see these weird comparisons where the people don't look alike at all, and it honestly makes me value that person's judgment less. I think like I can't trust that person, not in the sense that they're purposely deceptive or they're liars or anything like that, but just like I wouldn't be able to trust that person's judgment because they see two faces and they see a similarity that doesn't exist. And obviously there's like a whole racial component where people look at other races, especially races that typically all have the same hair color or skin tone and things like that, and people will see resemblance between them, and that's annoying too. But it's like there is when you're from the out group, I think it's easier to see everyone in an in group, I guess. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but I can see where you can kind of see people of a different group as ultimately more similar. It's like if you're looking at a subculture, even where everyone in the subculture like does their hair a certain way and dresses a certain way, I can see where like there's going to be more of a resemblance. But I see it all the time with just basic people. And and it's weird too when someone compares you to a celebrity, and I don't get it very often, which is kind of surprising because I think that I'm a really generic, average looking white male in America, of European descent. I have, light brown hair, average build, and I surprisingly don't get compared to people that often. A number of years ago, I got two Orson Welles comparisons in a relatively short amount of time by two completely different people. One of them was a coworker, the other one was my friend's wife, and like it was just like I loved it, you know, because whenever someone compares you to somebody, especially a celebrity, a physical comparison, it's weird, you know, because always has the potential of like hurting somebody's feelings. Uh, you know, especially if it's like if it's not a conventionally attractive celebrity or something like that. It's kind of a you're making a gamble when you compare someone to a celebrity or anybody for that matter. You look just like my friend. I mean, I was watching the movie Friday, yes, 2 days ago, and I realized I had never actually seen the whole thing. I think I had just absorbed little bits of it, and I kind of felt like I had seen it. And everybody, when I was growing up, like came out in the mid '90s, when I was in school, everybody, all the guys, just were talking about it all the time. It was around the time that hip hop like really just took over schools. Hip hop took over schools. No, it was around that time though that nobody was really listening. You know, music wise, like suddenly everybody in the school just listened to nothing but hip hop. Friday was the favorite movie everyone was quoting, and so I'd never actually seen it. But anyway, there's a scene where the guy's talking on the phone to a woman he hasn't met, and she's like, "Everyone tells me I look like Janet Jackson," and he's all excited, and he meets her, and of course, guess what? She doesn't look like Janet Jackson. She doesn't look too great. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that a comedy would set up a scenario like that? But it's just funny because that's a whole thing people do too. Is people tell me I look just like so and so, and usually when someone says that, what they mean is I have this fantasy where I look like so and so. Because it's kind of a weird thing, you know, to broadcast. You know, if you feel that you have a resemblance, or even if someone has told you you look like someone, it's kind of weird to broadcast that. And here I am on here saying like, two people told me I look like Orson Welles, you know, they did, and I was taken aback by it because I never imagined that, and I was really happy with it. That's my point, is I was really happy with that comparison. Since we're on this subject, I was also told once Mark Ruffalo, and I had a loose idea of who that was at the time, and I wasn't offended by that either. But anyway, Orson Welles was really cool, and one person said it was my mannerisms, and that makes sense to me. I think that makes sense a little bit. But I was really proud of that one. But then in high school, when I was quite a bit heavier, I remember some friends and I got stoned, and we were at. I had a friend who had graduated, and we would hang out at his house. And his roommate was quite a bit older and brought a friend over, and his roommate's friend was just kind of fucking with us because he knew we were high, and he was and not really fucking with us, but just kind of talking to us and like talking to us about like what types of stoners we are. Just like, and I remember he said to me, he's like, "I bet you're like the Chris Farley of the group." And he wasn't trying to insult me. He wasn't like being like, "You're fat." He was a nice guy, but I remember thinking, "Oh wow, that guy just like assumed that I'm the Chris Farley of the group because I'm fat." And people will do that. Like I've seen that happen to friends and stuff where they'll say they resemble a celebrity, and like the only thing they have in common is like their weight or something like that. And it's just such a weird thing. And as I said, I use this all to determine someone's intelligence. Because I think when I see people compare someone who honestly has not even a passing resemblance to somebody, I'm like, what is wrong with your judgment? What is wrong with your ability to compare two things? What else do you get wrong in life? It reminds me, my friend Miles a couple years ago was telling me about watching some documentary with his dad, and I think they showed some sort of vintage like 1960s film footage. It might have been war protest footage, Vietnam footage, something like that. And his dad was like, that's old footage, right? uh and Miles, he was telling me about it, and he was like, man, like he's like, if I have like one power, I can tell when film footage is fucking vintage. All right, I can look at and it seems obvious, of course you can look at certain film footage and be like, that's old. But I feel like it's a similar sort of idea where some people don't really pick up on those nuances, and I'm not saying you're super advanced because you can look at a 1960s stock footage and know when it's from. But I think I wish I could remember the exact way Miles phrased it, because he was like, if I have one power, it's like I can tell like what era fucking film footage is from. But I feel like that kind of translates to this whole like comparing someone to celebrities, and I feel like or just any kind of resemblance, because I feel like I feel like my judgment on this is pretty clear. Like maybe I'm the one, like, who has the very supremely low intelligence, and I'm just lacking some ability to see similarities between people. I mean, it's entirely possible, like, I'm the one with the problem. I mean, even if I'm right about all this, I'm still the one with the problem. That much is clear. The fact that this is a problem to me, and that I use this as a standard of judging another human being's intelligence, while letting other much more relevant standards of intelligence go. Like I'll let the dumbest, like someone can like not know how to, like someone will be like, I don't know how to do the laundry, and I'm like, oh cool, makes sense. It's just something you didn't learn. And meanwhile, it's like they make a bad comparison between two people's faces, and I'm just like, oh my god, oh, get them out of here. uh you know so it's like I'm the one with the problem here. That much is clear. But it's just one of those things, and the thing is, maybe when people are doing it, they're being facetious, and I don't just know it. But I feel like I'm a very good judge of facetiousness, and that's actually a good transition, because the second standard that I use to determine a person's intelligence is whether they can pick up on facetiousness or not, facetiousness in humor. And I think facetiousness is different than sarcasm, because when you think about sarcasm, even just the word sarcasm has this sort of like bluntness to it. It's like, oh yeah, sure, sure you did. And I'm not a big fan of sarcasm. I think of like, when I think of sarcasm, I think of Janine Garofalo for some reason. I think of her sense of humor, and I don't even know if her sense of humor is sarcastic or not. But sarcasm is this sort of blunt, sort of like, it's like this New York sort of blunt, overemphasized kind of dismissal. It's like this weird, like, oh, okay, I bet you did. And there's more advanced forms of sarcasm than just saying like, huh, oh, sure. There's more advanced. I just can't think of them. But facetiousness is more like acting. I feel like more like acting. It's more like acting. It's more like you kind of invest in this role briefly. And I'm not saying it's that sophisticated. And let me get into that, because even though I use somebody's ability to detect facetiousness as sort of a standard of their intelligence, I'm not saying that facetiousness is a high form of humor. And even though a lot of my sense of humor is facetious, I think of it as kind of low brow. I think of it as kind of easy. But that makes it that much more, I don't know, telling when someone can't pick up on it. Because it's one thing if it's really dry, or it's one thing if you don't know somebody at all. Because, if somebody's new to you, chances are they have this level of anxiety, and they're kind of like, they're not ready for facetiousness. They're not ready to be picking up on those things, because their mind is going elsewhere. Uh, it's like I can kind of see that. But if you know somebody, like if you see someone at work every day, or if they're a family member or a friend, and they just can't pick up on facetiousness, it's it sucks. I mean, it makes you not want to be around that person, and not because they don't laugh. Like, I never expect anybody to laugh at facetiousness. I never expect anybody to think that it's really funny, or to give it a bunch of credit. But you can tell when someone doesn't pick up on it, and one of the worst ways that you can tell they can't pick up on it is when they actually respond to it in earnest. And by in earnest, I mean like the Ernest movies. They respond to it by acting like Ernest, and they trump your facetiousness with this whole other level of facetiousness that is pretending to be the character Ernest. No, but they respond in earnest, and they have a sincere response. But usually it's like, no, that's not it. It's not. It's like, and they're not being sarcastic, or they're on a higher level of facetiousness where they're not even expressing sarcasm. Uh, but they're able to dismiss what you're saying very subtly. I don't know. No, but really, there's a whole form of person, and they're often the very like scientific minded. I mean, I get it if you're on like the autism spectrum and stuff, because there are certain personality types, disorders, and things that I think do prevent you from picking up on those sort of cues, or like how a sociopath can't apparently can't yawn, or they they can yawn, but how yawns aren't contagious to them because there's some weird emotional component to yawning where like it connects to empathy somehow is what I've heard. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. Kind of yawning connects to empathy. I've heard. But I get if you have some sort of block, like some diagnosable block that prevents it. But there's a whole personality type, and it tends to be this person who likes facts. You know, I like facts too, but they like talking in this factual way. In this, everything's very clinical to them. Uh, and they're often very intelligent people in the traditional sense. They're often very studious. You know, they're good at math and they're good at math and science, but they lack this ability to pick up on just basic facetiousness. And as I said, it's like I don't expect people to find facetiousness funny. I don't expect people to laugh at it, but I do expect you to kind of be able to pick up on it. And it's almost an evolutionary thing because I think it's generational, where I think people who are a little bit older do have a struggle in picking up on those things. I think humor evolves, and I mean, you look at like what kids are into today, and not just kids, but even people in my age group. And you think about not memes, but like even just that weird, for lack of a better word, it's sort of like that meme humor where it's like this really just blown out, like psychologically disintegrated internet humor. And it's really far beyond me, and I only see glimpses of it here and there. But it's like extreme detachment from everything, and an adult would have no way of getting their brains into that or around that, and I don't either. As someone who grew up with the internet, like I can't even really get my mind around a lot of that stuff. Like I can kind of see where it comes from because I know like the path that humor takes. Like if you start a joke with a friend and your senses of humor are really aligned, uh, an inside joke will like pretty quickly disintegrate into like something truly bizarre that's like a mutated form of a mutation of a hacked up idea. I don't even know what to say about it. It's like I love that though when you have a friend who you have like a really a great rapport with, and you'll just like hack a fucking idea to death, and it becomes just the most bizarre mutant form of the original joke. I mean, the original joke isn't even. There's no resemblance to whatever the initial inspiration was, and that's kind of what I see with some of this like younger generation internet humor. You can tell where it started as one thing, like a reference to one thing, and then it just disintegrated and bubbled. And like when you think about the greater unconscious, collective unconscious internet, I don't even know. You think about all that just feeding into it, thousands of brains. It's just insane. I can see where that happens, even if I don't understand the jokes. So I think there is a generational thing too, to just basic facetiousness too, where older generations aren't going to get it, and that's understandable. Like your parents, in a lot of cases, probably aren't going to pick up on some of those little cues. And I do understand where facetiousness can be annoying. Like if somebody's facetious all the time, and myself, thinking about me, I do think that I reach this point where sometimes I don't know whether I'm kidding or not anymore. I'll start out on this kind of facetious line of thought, and then I'll just keep going with it, and I've kind of lost track of where it begins and ends, and then that becomes a part of my personality, and they kind of feed into each other. And I don't really know what my values or opinions or what my personality even is anymore. As I said earlier, I'm the one with the problem. So I understand, like, especially if you're in a situation where somebody needs to be serious, Like if you're working on a project, a work project, a school project, something like that, and you're trying to brainstorm ideas, and someone just keeps throwing out joke ideas, or they keep playing a part, they keep doing a facetious role. Like eventually, you want to go, hey, snap the fuck out of it. And so I try to be conscious of that as someone who probably does get annoyingly stuck in weird roles, because like as I said earlier, it is facetiousness. It's more of this form of acting, a very low grade form of acting, than it is something like sarcasm, which is just based on like overemphasizing the opposite of what you actually mean, because that's just not funny to me. And I'm not saying, there's people who are good at it, but it's just not that funny to me. And that's an interesting thing too, because it kind of plays into what I'm saying, where I don't think someone has to find facetiousness funny, but just having the ability to pick up on it is kind of essential in this current world we live in, and shows to me that someone isn't really evolving with the world around them. Because you think about, like, I think stand-up comedy could be kind of an example in this, because I am just not a big stand-up comedy fan. That said, I listen to a lot of podcasts by stand-up comedians, and I really enjoy listening to them talk, and I find them very funny as people. But when I watch an actual stand-up comedy set, it's a little too rehearsed, it's a little too punctuated, and I'm really impressed by it. That's the thing, is like I get the humor, and I can judge whether a joke is good or not, even if I don't find it personally funny. I can determine if that comedian made a good joke. Uh, Even if it doesn't make me laugh, I can appreciate the art form. And I feel like that kind of plays into this, where it's just being able to recognize when someone is being funny is just an important step. Uh, or not when someone is being funny, but when they're even just trying to be funny. But yeah, those two, and there's a level of facetiousness even to all this, which I hate to even mention, but it's like, obviously I don't judge people entirely by these two standards. I don't really judge people. I'm being a bit facetious by even using this as my topic for a video, but they are two things that do bother me. So once again, reality and fiction kind of blend together here, where these are two major pet peeves of mine. Yet I don't really judge people's intelligence by them, but here talking about it, I'm clearly passionate.